Hey guys, what's up and welcome back. Today we want to do the in-depth build analysis for the TvP opener. So we have a replay prepared against the AI to go through. This one is like the near final draft, and then the slide has the best timings for everything. Okay, and we'll go through it at between 2 and 4 speed, depending on where we're at. So we're going to open 16, 16, 17 double gas with a 17 scout. And what we want to do is have the TVT and the TVP double gas openers be identical for as long as possible. So we don't have our first branch until we're choosing between the reactor and starport timing. We saturate our gases. Reaper orbital depot, and then we can focus on our scout. Our scout's looking for the cyber and expansion timings, checking for the pylons, checking the gas and gate count. We build our factory in a defensive position away from the blink-in spot. All right, we're playing defensive against the warp prism and the blink-in. We did a gas cut, dropped the expansion, resaturate gas, 2 Reapers and a Cyclone. When the Cyclone pops, we can send these Reapers out for a scout. And then reactor before starport. Spotting depot, again spotting the blink all-in spot. First tech lab, and the starport's going to swap onto that. Begin marine production, also get the bunker. The dude who built the spotting depot can also build the bunker, so he's setting up our most forward positions for us. That guy's doing good work. The guy who built the starport is building the refinery. We go interference matrix, then Raven, then siege tank. And then when we drop the 2 mules, that's when we're going to continue producing single depot. So now we're kind of in our initial defensive setup, right? We've got the makings of our Sim City, and it's only going to grow a little bit more after this. So when interference matrix finishes, we swap that off. We don't want to build that reactor right now. We want to focus on the 2 barracks, then the 2 E-bays, and then the 4th refinery. Okay, and at this point we can zoom through a little bit. As our tanks are popping out, we need to be placing them in the key defensive positions. And then in terms of order of starting the upgrades, we put stim on priority, and then get +1/+1 ideally, and then combat shield and concussive. So now we're just producing 4M, and we're going to produce 4M for another 30 seconds, and then get ready for our push out. So when we're leaving, we've built up an army that's got 23 Marines, 6 Marauders, 4 Mines, 5 Medevacs. The only real deviation from the replay is when we swap the starport off. We're going to do 1 to 2 naked starport units, so either like Viking or Medevac off of a naked starport. And then when the factory's done building 3 tanks, it'll swap for its reactor. And when the starport is done building 1 to 2 starport units roughly in line with the factory finishing, we'll start its reactor then. So that's really the only deviation. And then the other thing we could be doing is the double depot production can build a depot wall in advance of our push out timing. But basically what's going to happen here is our +1/+1 bio upgrades are going to finish roughly at the time that we're on the other side of the map. So we push out at 7:30, we get to the other side of the map in 8 minutes, And our upgrades are going to be +1/+1 bio, so stim, combat, shields, and concussive shells, and then the interference matrix for the Raven, which we're just getting because we want the one Raven regardless, and we might as well have interference matrix for RoboBay units. Okay, so that was the build. Let's look at the slide. So the slide just reinforces the key concepts. It's the 16, 16, 17 double gas with 17 SCV Scout. It's going to be exactly the same as the TvT opener. The double Reaper is the follow-up Scout. We want to put the Cyclone in the mineral line as a Stargate defense. So Cyclone in the main mineral line kind of blind counters Oracle. And, you know, we don't always get to scout the starport, right? It could be proxied on the map. So we want to defensively position the Cyclone to blind counter the first Oracle. And then Marine Bunker and Cyclone Tank is kind of like our gateway all-in defense. Just depends on where we're at with building the tech lab, if we can go to tanks or not. Otherwise, we can just keep doing Cyclones. And then if it's like a proxy starport Tempest Rush, we can break out of that with a 1/1/1 all reactors going Marine, Cyclone, Viking, right? Our 2-base defense is the 3-tank setup for anti-blink, and then we need the Ravens and the SimCity for DTs. The Raven with interference matrix can also disable a warp prism as it's warping in units, so if they try to go that route and blink in and then try to warp in more, you can kind of surprise them with the interference matrix, and that could be kind of a gotcha moment. And what we're doing is we're defending our production and our tech transition, right? So the 3 tanks and the Raven is kind of the opening units, right? And if you look at the unit compositions, that's what it's trying to depict. The Reaper and the Cyclone is the skirmishing units. The Bunker, Tank, and Raven are the defensive units. And then we need to build up our infantry. So our infantry buildup is that 4M buildup. And we're looking to do a 2-base all-in push timing with 4M and Raven Tank. And then for Raven, the spellcasting is basically prioritized for either anti-armor missile against the gateway ball or interference matrix against robo units like Colossus or Disruptor. Maybe a High Templar, but less likely. Better for the Colossus. And then basically, same as the Mind Drop review, Protoss has the choice of counters. They can either do Blink All In, which is designed to kill or interrupt our build. The DTs are like equivalent to that. And then the RoboBay Tech Rush is designed to defend. Nobody seems to be going that route anymore. They don't seem to be doing Colossus Rush as often as they're doing Blink Rush. And then the first production transition, Factory's building the tech lab for the starport swap. Starport's building interference matrix and a Raven, lifts off, and then build naked starport units off that starport for a cycle or 2. Factory builds 3 tanks. While all that's going on, right, the second production transition is kicking in. After we lifted off the starport, we built 2 racks, 2 E-bays, the 4th gas, and then 2 reactors. And then our upgrade priority is stim, then +1/+1, then shields and shells, where shells will get queued up, usually behind stim. So if stim is a quarter of the way done, we can just queue up shells behind stim, and that'll finish faster than queuing up shields and shells together. So that's kind of the cutoff point. Just look at the bar, and if the bar is a quarter or more complete, queue up shells behind that. And then we're basically trying to get to 1 full minute of 4M production uninterrupted so that we can power up for the timing. We're going to leave at 7:30, bring everything with us, drop the 3rd command center, turn it into an orbital, set up turret defense if necessary, and then, depending on how the fight goes, resume SCV production or not. So that's how we'll transition to 3-base. And what we can do is, I guess, talk about the compositions that we think we should anticipate, right? So we're talking about the full 2-base saturation right now with a push out And then as we're doing the push out, we're choosing whether we want to drop the third CC or not, right? So if we drop the third CC, we're transitioning from the early game into one of those mid-game compositions, right? Our early game setup is this 4M Tank Raven that we just talked about, and it's specifically to counter Twilight openers, right? So the meta is Twilight opener now because of the Cyclone change, and this is what we didn't realize at first. But then we saw Clem just kill parting with Cyclone Marine on one of the recent winter videos and realize, okay, just like how the Cyclone has made different all-ins in all three matchups, and the meta shifted accordingly, is basically what happened. So that's why in the previous meta, we were countering RoboBay tech, essentially, by going Mind Drop, right? So we'd either do 3 racks stim timing to get in under RoboBay tech, or we would do Mind Drop to stunt their economy so that our 2 base push and their 3 base defense were more equivalent, right? So that meta is now gone, and now we're in the Twilight pressure all-in meta. So we shifted into this build, and the good news is in that same winter video where it's Clem versus Parting, we saw both sides of this. We saw Clem do the Cyclone early all-in that got a free win, which is why people go Twilight, and we also saw Clem do Blink all-in defense with this exact same setup, the Tank Raven setup, and then the same push out with 4M. So that's what we're going to include in the external links. Is the I like using the Google Sheets with the spreadsheet, and I just stick the slide in there. So I'll stick a clean version of the slide in the notes in the external link for the spreadsheet, and then I can put the replay of the Verse AI build guide, and then also a link to the winter video where it's the title is Bjorn vs. Parting, but it's a 2-parter. It's got Bjorn vs. Parting and then Clem vs. Parting. So Parting is the guy who invented the 4-gate blink, which is basically what the current meta is playing. So you get to see it from the perspective of the dude who mastered it, and get to see the number 1 Terran defend against it. So basically extremely relevant to what we're talking about and how we developed this build. But the good news is we kind of were trending towards this before we saw Clem use it. But now we, after seeing him, I think we understand it a lot better, which is what got us ready to get the slide in good shape, and then all of the various early game to mid game to late game transitions. So I guess I could talk to these for a minute here. So the difference between the early game and the mid game, it's basically all about countering whatever Protoss is doing, right? So the the whole idea of the Protoss is the dogs playing poker, right? So they have to coin flip after Cybercore with one of 3 techs, right? And if you scout it, you can have a plan against it so you're not freestyling, right? But the first one, you should kind of have a plan to blind counter the flip, essentially. And that's what we're doing. So we're getting into a defensive anti-all-in setup, and then if we see that they're committing to Fleet Beacon and multiple Stargates, we can quickly transition into more of like a TvT biotank setup, so like Marine Tank Medevac with Viking support. We can very easily switch into that with the open. So if we see that they're going heavy into Stargate, we can immediately switch our strategy. Or if they're just going gateway heavy, like including High Templar, so all of the gateway units basically, then we can simply add ghosts. The combination of the mines and the ghosts is effective against shields, and then you need ghosts to counter High Templar. And if they see that we're going bio in RMMR, they're most likely going to tech up to High Templar for Storm, because Storm Ghost versus High Templar battles in low elo like could go either way. Like in the pros, they kind of skip High Templar because the micro battle seems to go the way of the Ghost, but in lower elo, we're both just firing stuff off. So we should build ghosts, we should be ready with EMPs, and then, gateway needs splash. So gateway man is kind of the description for heavy charge lots. So the bio mine, the widow mine, and the ghost is key there. So repeating myself a little bit, but it's to say that the other forms of splash are coming from the Robo Bay. So you have Colossus as Robo Bay tech, you have Disruptor as Robo Bay tech. Each of them can get a different counter. The Viking against the Colossus, the Liberator against the Disruptor. And then the Ghost is kind of always relevant because at our ELO, the threat of the High Templar is always there. And then the joke is, if we get to a point where Protoss is tech to all gateway upgrades, so they've got like Warp Gate, Charge, Blink, they've got 4 types of splash, so they've got Colossus, Disruptor, High Templar, Archons, whatever. They've got DTs, and they're transitioning into Sky Toss, so they're like transitioning into Carrier Tempest Mothership. Well, then we're dead. So like, just get over it. Which is why it's so important that we have this tech rush for the 8-minute mark, so that we can get in under them, under that red bar. Like, we don't want to let them tech to everything. We got to get in under it. And if we somehow get into that red bar, then we need to play like just straight bio with ghosts, Vikings, and libs. So this is why you always see people lift the factory off and either patrol it in the airspace or just kind of hover the factory. You stop building mines at this point because you got to go heavier into air. You got to have a lot of Vikings to counter the Sky Toss, along with the libs to protect on the ground. And what they're going to have is going to look like Sky Toss plus High Templar is going to be like their ultimate comp, plus like some infantry, right? They're always going to have some charge lots and stalkers, but they're basically going Sky Toss plus Storm, right? Or at least that's what the composition could look like. They could be totally crazy and like the High Templars are in the Warp Prism and they're playing like pro, but that's typically not what we see in the Plat Diamond border, right? Oh man, this take took like, no joke, 10 plus tries, and it's just because of how complicated the matchup is, not from like an execution perspective, but from trying to explain it, right? Protoss is the one matchup where we have to react to like every fork in their tech branch, and there's kind of like a generic way of getting there, but it's complicated to get to, and it's been difficult to get out of the early game into the mid game against the Twilight openers, specifically the blink pressures. So this directly addresses that. It's got the transition concepts, and if we get some good replays for some of these, we can do them. We have a couple of replays we could watch about the transition against the Fleet Beacon Stargate commitment, but it's a simple concept. You're just going Marine tank medevac and killing their 4th, 5th base so that they can't have the economy that's needed to sustain the carriers, right? We can just keep them from getting critical massive carriers. If they max out on carriers, you're dead. But if you can fight their bases and whittle down their numbers, then they can't sustain the interceptors anymore because the interceptors cost minerals. So that mid-game transition is pretty straightforward. And the more complicated ones are, what do we do against Gateway plus Splash? And then what do we do when they not only have Gateway plus Splash, but are also going heavy into air? I hope I can get a split map game. The next video will be if I can get to a point where we have a split map game that's got that we're in the red zone. Like we're taking the green zone for granted, knowing that we've played plenty of games with like Ghost Viking and Ghost Lib compositions with mines. That's not that difficult to play. We just have to be in the exact correct situation for it, which up until now we didn't have the path to get there consistently. But now we can get to these mid-late game transitions, hopefully comfortably. So I don't think we need to go over that in replay reviews unless we string together a bunch of wins and can show patterns. But if we can get to like a game that can be like a showcase game that's got all the late game concepts, then we'll definitely do that. So, all right. Found a way to tie it in at the end there. Hopefully the content's valuable and And I think I've described what links I'm going to put in the description already, so go ahead and take a look. All right, thanks, guys.